friends. Welcome to the Creative Impact Podcast. I'm your host, Rachel Caldwell, and I'm so happy you're here. Each episode, I take some time to chat with fellow artists about life, faith, and the impact of the arts. Well, Chelsea, I'm so excited to have you on the podcast today. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me, Rachel. It's such an honor, and it's so nice to meet you.
I know. It's nice to finally meet you as well. It's been fun kind of being in touch via social media for a little bit and, getting to connect through Cynthia Newland and YWAM people. We have so many mutual friends, which is really fun.
Points of connection.
Exactly. Yes, Adeum. And it was fun. We were kind of learning more about each other before we hit record. We're this person and this person. So I love that about the dance world, especially the Christian dance world. Such a connected family. So well, just to give our listeners a little background on who you are, and then I'll let you also introduce yourself. So Chelsea is originally from New Mexico and currently living in Costa Rica, which is so fun, and working for Youth with a Mission, or YWAM, doing their University of the Nations, but the sort of a dance dance school. I'll let you explain.
No, you got it.
Awesome. And so if people remember, I'll post this episode as well, but when Tammy Tolas was on the show, she is at YWAM in Kona. And so you're kind of a similar role, but in YWAM Costa Rica, right?
Right. Yeah.
So cool. And then, also lots of experience with performance and choreography, teaching, and you're a mom and a wife. So many things, but it's so great to have you on. And I'm excited to learn from your journey and hear your story today.
Thanks, Rachel.
No problem. You want to is there anything else you'd like to share about yourself or kind of your family and what you're up to?
Yeah, at the moment, actually, Tammy in Kona really helped boost our School of Dance in Costa Rica.
Oh, that's awesome.
And so we only have a couple years that it's run, but I've been there for about 7 years, kind of preparing the ground. And then, married to my husband of almost 10 years, and he's from Mexico.
Cool.
In January, we'll celebrate. And then my daughters are 4 and 2.
Aww.
And I'm currently serving on the regional and global arts faculty with the University of the Nations, which is really just a branch of YWAM. It is YWAM, basically.
Gotcha. Okay.
It's the university within YWAM.
Yes.
And helping to hopefully support other programs that are being launched in Latin America, in Central America, and the Caribbean, and Mexico. And working in a couple of studios in San José. That's where we are in the city in Costa Rica. And so, that's what we're doing.
Oh, that's so exciting.
At the moment.
Yes. And you're expecting another little one on the way. So
we're about 3 months pregnant.
So exciting. Yes. Congratulations. And so that'll be
Thank you.
Number 3, right?
Number 3, in March.
Okay.
Coming in March, supposedly.
Awesome. So fun. And we were talking a little bit earlier, and we'll get to it probably later in the podcast, but that you are also hoping, working towards starting a podcast of your own. So I'm really excited about that.
And I just want to pick your brain about that today. So we'll just make this interview about that.
There we go. There's probably other people out there that are like, I want to start a podcast too. So we could.
Right. That's a different focus.
Right. So fun. Yes. Well, I would love to hear kind of what first got you into dance and a little bit about kind of your background with that.
Yes. I started quote unquote late. I was about 15 and I started dancing we should back up. I grew up on Baryshnikov Nutcracker, which I'm sure you've seen.
Yes.
Watching things like that, or figure skating and doing things with my sisters, and thinking that it was a pie in the sky dream, be a dancer or something. But then in my high school, they actually offered performing arts. There was a performing arts academy. So I started dancing as part of my gym credits.
Nice. That's great.
It's a performing arts academy. And then just kind of skipped levels there by God's grace, I guess, and ended up in kind of the high school company, which was called Master Dance at Rio Rancho High School near Albuquerque, New Mexico. And then from there, went to university. because of kind of the toxicity of the environment, I thought, oh, that's the last thing I'm going to study, dance. I'm going to study something else. So I went to Messiah. It was Messiah College at the time, but it's called Messiah University now.
Okay.
And they didn't have a dance program, but they had a dance club. And so I was studying literature, but ended up part of this club, which I wasn't planning on, and then ended up teaching for this club. And it was pretty technical. We would do some ministry, but it was performance focused. And from there, after graduation, was able to do the School of Dance with Youth with a Mission in Montana.
Oh, okay.
Which was called the School of Dance Studies at the time. And it was like a 7-month program or something. And that was really where I felt like I was playing my note, like, dance history and composition, but it has faith integrated and everything. And after that, jumped over to Houston because of kind of connections, Randall Flynn's connections with YWAM in Montana.
Yes.
I was able to train in Houston and then dance with some other companies in Houston, and went back to staff with School of Dance in Montana. And that took us on a missions trip to Mexico. I staffed a couple of schools of dance there and then ended up in Mexico, and my commitment had ended. And so I stayed in Mexico, which was something they talked a lot about, people staying, after they go on a missions trip or an outreach, stayed there. And that's where I met my husband and continued to kind of teach and work in Mexico for about 5 years. And we did our discipleship school with YWAM in Costa Rica after we were married, and stayed in Costa Rica essentially. Nice. Went back to Mexico for a little bit and then just stayed in Costa Rica and continued to work with YWAM. In Mexico, we weren't with YWAM, more with some dance companies there and teaching in studios and things like that. But
that's so cool. And just for those that are listening, if they haven't heard Tammy talk about it, do you mind just explaining kind of the dance like session that you do? What do you call it again?
We call it so creative and original, School of Dance.
School of Dance. There we go. Yeah, because I know it's like kind of a certain time frame and people will come for like a session. So yeah, how does that work?
Yeah, it's definitely seasonal. It's there. So with Tammy, and Tammy is really the academic advisor and kind of developing this degree program, specific to dance. But you would have School of Dance 1, which is about 6 months long, and then School of Dance 2, which is about 6 months. And you can do for other credits, you need some other schools that are Bible focused or have some other focuses and do some seminars and things like that. So what we have been running is School of Dance 1, which is 6 months, 3 months of what we call lecture phase or campus phase, where you're training, learning choreographies from different guest artists. They have a lot of academic work, dance history, nutrition, anatomy, pedagogy, composition, those kind of things, along with rehearsals and technique. And then they take all of that, all of their repertoire essentially, and go on their 3-month outreach to another nation, partly in Costa Rica for us. We do spend like at least a couple weeks in Costa Rica, and then we go to another nation and use it kind of through, we share the gospel, or we connect with people, disciple through performance and teaching essentially.
Yeah, that's great. So cool. Thanks for explaining, because I know that'll help people just to kind of envision what your life looks like. So I know kind of in our pre-interview questions and things, you mentioned that your journey has been eclectic. And so I would love to hear you just like share it, because I love that description. So yeah, what does that look like?
Yeah, that's how it's felt, eclectic. And I think because of having just such a variety of experiences, kind of like a little bit here and a little bit there. Even in Mexico, I was working a little bit in the entertainment industry with like singers and things like that. And then a little bit in sort of the arts, contemporary industry, but I think I always say God pursued me. He sort of chased me down with dance. Like at every turn I would come across, like it was offered in my high school and then offered at my university. And it's as if I couldn't escape dance, which seems kind of silly.
I know what you mean though.
Yeah. Like it seems there's maybe the classic, like I started at 4 and never looked back, and I've been pursuing but my story just wasn't like that. And I think I've had a wide variety of teachers, but never stayed really in one place for a long, long period of time. And so it's been eclectic.
Yes.
That's how it feels.
Yeah. Kind of taking all these different experiences and it's kind of pieced together into where you are now. So yeah,
right.
That's really
even diving into like swing dance for a season or diving into Latin rhythms for a season, and eventually focusing mostly on contemporary professionally. But yeah,
makes sense. That's so cool. Yes, thanks for sharing. I was like, I just love that description. So speaking of kind of just seeing God's hand in it, you know, what have you learned as you've followed God through all these different seasons? And especially a lot of transition, because you guys, you know, you've moved a lot, it sounds like. So before you got married and then after getting married. So
I think Costa Rica is the longest in my adult life that I've been in one place, actually.
Wow.
We've been here about 7 years, coming up on 7 years. No, it is. It's September, right? Yes. 7 years. I honestly, I think what I started to see with my story, one thing is I really love change. Okay. Maybe because my family also embraced change or moved, you know, but so it's something that I enjoy is change and embrace. Mm-hmm. I think naturally, I know that for some people that can be a real challenge. Just to uproot is really disconcerting. So I think change hasn't been so difficult for me or for us. But something I started to realize, even with my starting to dance at 15 and still being able to take it into a profession, which isn't what they tell you, you know, what the world, quote unquote, would tell you, or like you have to start at a certain time, or you're behind, or you have to climb a certain ladder, you know. I just continually saw how the Lord would position me in places that I didn't earn, in a sense. Like one very concrete example is that I never danced in competitions. I was never a competition dancer. But then I find myself in Mexico, I was invited to be judging for competitions, you know? And so it for me, it just was another moment of God works outside of the box. He doesn't need you to climb the ladder. This might be controversial, but I tell dancers, you don't have to audition everywhere. Yeah. Get the Lord's direction. Be a plan A kind of person. You know, God's plan A is this. And if that door closes, what's the next plan A? You know? Yeah. Because I think he can speak, he can guide us. Not to say that auditioning lots of places is wrong, because that's great experience, you know, but I kind of realized, you know, God can open a door anywhere. He's the one who holds the keys to the doors. Ooh, you don't have to own, or you don't have to earn XYZ, you know, by doing XYZ or whatever. So some of my best auditions, I've not gotten the job. And I think when I auditioned for the trainee program at ADEAM, I had like a sty in my eye. I felt terrible. Like just and you know, sometimes the door opens when it's really the Lord. He guides it and he works outside of the box. He doesn't need you to check all the boxes and, or always, I don't know if this is the right usage, but always like working within the status quo. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah. Kind of, it's definitely easy to kind of fall into this, like we have to almost like strive and make it happen on our own. And it's really encouraging to remember, you know, God's got it. And our part is to be faithful and to just, you know, be obedient to where he's leading us and calling us, and and then he'll take care of it, which is awesome. It's so easy to kind of feel like we have to control it and make it happen or whatever. So
what you said, obedience, that's so key. That is so key though, because we could be just lazy too, right? It's like, oh, I don't have to, God will do it. But you're right. Obedience is also super key, because he wants to position us. And it's kind of that balance, I think, of both at the same time, which is kind of a little hard to figure out, but we're all learning. Which we don't always walk. I don't walk perfectly, of course. I mean, there have been times I've wanted to run from what he's calling me to do too, you know? Exactly. Oh, but this would be so much easier, Lord.
So I'm just curious, for you personally, how do you feel like you sense God's guidance in your life?
Oh, that is a good question. It's a controversial question.
No, it is, I know, right?
His audible voice. No.
Yeah, exactly. I know it's so interesting, because it is like I think it's just cool how personal God is, and he can speak to each person a little bit differently in like a way that can, I don't know. Anyways, but I'm just curious to hear for you.
That's a really good, I want to hear your answer to that too.
Yeah.
Can we do that?
Sure. Sure. Yeah.
Well, I think this might be an artist thing, but I do love patterns. I'm looking at this back here, this quilt. Mm-hmm. I see God in, you know, signs, patterns. There were so many times actually living in Houston, those couple of years where, I mean, things like something would come on the radio saying my name, you know, or like just crazy. There was once I'm walking in feeling discouraged and like the car next to mine starts honking and I had left my lights on. It's like the Lord, like miraculous things, I think, in one sense, but really more often, I think intuitively, probably. Mm-hmm. I feel like I sense his guidance intuitively, and you can call that intuition, but I think it's like the Holy Spirit's nudging, you know, like, and also that the guidance aligns with his word, right? And his character and who he is, that it's not just my heart deceiving me or something like that. But yeah. And yeah, I don't know how to explain this, but I don't know if you experience this. I want to hear your answer.
Yeah.
But when you know something is hard, but right.
Ooh, yes.
And you're like, okay, that's hard. Peace, I think. Mm-hmm. It's hard and it's going to be hard, but I feel a sense of peace around it. Or there are things where that's hard and I don't feel any peace. Or it seems easy, but I don't feel any peace. Yeah. And I think that's a huge one for me, with that where the will of God is, there will be peace.
That's good.
And I don't know. So what about you?
Yeah, it is a hard question.
You're like, what?
Yeah. I think that's a good point about peace. And I think I've experienced that too, where it's like, yeah, it feels like this is going to be challenging, but I feel like it's the right thing, or there's peace with it. Interestingly, though, I also sometimes feel like it's when I feel nervous, I get kind of like the butterflies, like I should do this, but I feel, you know, I'm anxious because in my own flesh or whatever, like I'm feeling fearful about it, but it's like, no, I think the Lord is like calling me to step out and do whatever that thing is.
Like a quickening in your spirit or something. Yes. Yeah, I get that. Yeah.
So it's almost like that's a quickening is a good way to describe it. And then I like what you're saying about, you know, it's in line with, you know, who he is and his character and his word. I feel like I had another, like sometimes you mentioned kind of where things will happen and like, that just felt like something from the Lord for me, you know, in this moment. One story that was pretty cool recently was, so we had loss in my family in 2021, early 2021. We lost my sister. And I was pretty recently driving past the exit for her house and kind of on a road trip. So I'm going, and it's always a little bit hard just to drive by that side of town and, you know, passing the hospital where she died and like all of these things. And so I was coming towards the exit and this big semi truck pulls in front of me, but it didn't have anything on the trailer. It was just like the cab part and then the, you know, empty trailer part. And the back of the cab said, "God is good." And I was like, they were right in front of me as I'm driving through the exit. And then they got over and I never saw them again. And it was kind of just this cool moment of like, you know, thank you, Lord, for that. And just a reminder of, you know, God is good, even, yes, like we're grieving and he's still good. And he has her and he has me, you know what I mean? Right. Like we're, anyway, that was just kind of a cool moment.
I'm so sorry about that, but yeah, I know. I totally I totally understand that. I think, and it's like his grace is almost thicker in times of loss or around loss, surrounding loss. Yes. I don't know.
Yeah. It's almost like I've noticed more moments like that where it's like just God's grace, exactly. And his goodness and kind of reminding me that, you know, I'm not alone and that he's not forgotten us, you know what I mean? And anyway, so there's moments like that. And I think it is true that as we're, you know, seeking him, that a lot of times it is kind of you said intuition, but yeah, just we're an intuitive sort of thing, but it's almost like he aligns us with where he wants us to go. And so I don't know, it just, taking one step at a time and trying to seek his direction. And it's interesting. It's a really good It is a hard question, but it is interesting to hear like what people's experience is. And I think sometimes just resting and like, he's got us and he's going to take us where he has for us to go as we, again, step in obedience. So, and sometimes that feels a little scary.
Right. Yeah. And maybe like the longer you practice that, the more natural it becomes. And so it's hard to describe.
That's true.
Like, it sounds like you've been practicing it a long time. And it's like, how do I know that's God? I know him, or I feel familiar with him. Not that I always am right, because sometimes I'm way off.
Yeah. I feel like that's definitely an area where I'm still growing and learning. And I think part of it for me is realizing how much distraction I have in my life and trying to like quiet some of that noise and distraction, because it is easy to kind of be hearing all these other voices, you know? So.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. I'm fasting right now from social media, except occasional posts, but I make myself get on the computer.
Smart. Yeah.
Like we announced our pregnancy or something like that, you know, things like that. But it's been so refreshing. I might not go back.
Yeah.
It's amazing how, like, I don't know, it brings a lot of peace, at least for seasons, right? To take some seasons like that. But
for sure.
Along with I have plenty of distraction with my 4 and 2-year-olds.
Oh, yeah. Definitely. But that's so true. I think social media, and even, I know we're on a podcast right now, but even podcasts, like I can find myself just kind of constantly listening and realizing, okay, I need some just actual quiet as well and time to process, you know? So
I'm the same. Yeah. I didn't delete podcasts off my phone yet.
Yeah, that makes sense. I understand that. But I've been trying to be a little better with social media, especially in the morning, and not having that be like the first thing that I go to. It's just easy to get into that. And then you're kind of sitting there scrolling and it's like, anyway. So I think that's so key.
I did this. There's this book now. I'm forgetting what it's called. The Common Rule. I think it's called The Common Rule. Okay. Tammy actually got me onto this book too, but it talks about different things, but one of them is like practicing scripture before phone. Ooh. And I did that for a season, and that was also an amazing season. I don't know why I didn't keep doing
that. That's a good point though. Scripture before phone. Just easy to remember.
Sometimes your scripture's on your phone, but grabbing the hand Bible.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, love that. Well, I'm super curious. So you already kind of shared how you got into YWAM and working, you know, internationally and doing ministry. So just with your experience traveling internationally and getting to see the arts used in that setting, you know, especially dance in particular, how have you seen God using, you know, the arts to build the kingdom across borders, I guess, if that makes sense?
Right. Man, I think I've gotten to the point where I think, how do people spread the gospel without the arts? And I find, I mean, I don't know how familiar your listeners are with YWAM, but the core school is like a discipleship training school. And it's kind of a general school. It's not necessarily arts focused, although some of them are. But what's so interesting is that I think every discipleship training school, we call it DTS, every DTS uses the arts, whether they're artists or not. I mean, they'll create dramas and things like that. And it's like inherently they know this breaks down barriers, you know, like language barriers, but not just language barriers, like also, I'm sure you've had these discussions, because I think this is going around in the arts a lot, especially that book, Army Arising, how the arts are on the next great move of God or something, that we're really past the point where people want to hear arguments, like these modernistic arguments for faith, and they don't want to hear about like Christian morality, but they're still open to beauty. And art goes around the brain, right? The mind, or all of the arguments, and hits the heart. And I'm sure you've probably talked with people about that idea of the arts, but I think we're in that era, right? This like postmodern era where people are really thirsting for beauty and much more open to beauty in the arts than they are to just, you know, maybe a sermon or something like that. So internationally, I think I think I've had actually more experience internationally than in my own nation, which is the US.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess a few stories come to mind, but maybe I can share a couple. We were on a missions outreach in Mexico, and this wasn't necessarily, it wasn't arts focused. And I was trying to champion my students to do the ministry. You know, we were serving at an orphanage for several days. And this was one of the poorest orphanages that I've ever seen, where like babies are in diapers and the teenage girls are caring for the babies, and the directors are stressed out and never there. And so we were trying to split into groups, and I ended up with some of my students who are adults with these teenage girls. Several days in a row, they just were closed off to us. They wouldn't open up. We were trying to paint nails, talk to them, but it's like, who are you? You know, you're this team of people coming through, and what are we don't want to tell you our secrets, you know? Like, you're just going to tell the directors that we have boyfriends or whatever. And so the last day I just was like, that's it. We're doing dance. And I just tried to like kick their butt with like a jazz class, you know? And suddenly they were all like eager and open and like wanting to excel, you know, and they just needed a challenge, really.
Yeah.
So that was a time where it was really tangible to me, just how a technique class even can just open up people's hearts to discipleship, and you kind of earn the not the authority, but the influence, I guess, to share with them and for them to share their hearts. We even did sort of like a movement, like processing your pain through movement, you know, so there's the therapeutic aspect, right, to dance, I think, especially the arts, but dance is definitely my focus more than anything.
Yeah. And so much of pain, I mean, it is embodied, right? Like, we hold it in our bodies. So to be able to move in a way that's like intentionally kind of processing through that and finding healing in that, I don't know, there's something powerful about it.
Exactly. I've actually been thinking a lot about this idea, this embodiment idea. I'm thinking in Spanish now. There are some topics that I think more in Spanish. Incorporado, like incorporated, right?
Yes.
This in cuerpo, like, and also thinking about the incarnation of Christ, and we are completely like physical, material beings, you know? And so, yes, definitely dance is so powerful in that sense. Like, where Christ is still in his body, you know, and our bodies will be renewed. And yeah, I've been thinking, I don't think I've gotten to the end of that thought. Still like really processing that, chewing on that a lot more, this idea of the incarnation, really. But there was another story where we were I was a student in this case. We were in Taipei, Taiwan, and we took kind of an abstract modern piece to perform at a university for some dance majors.
Oh, cool.
So it was kind of like an arts exchange. They performed for us, and then we performed for them, and they performed in their like Chinese opera, like perfect. We were so intimidated, like, oh my goodness, like what can we offer for these people? And in the university, we couldn't share the gospel openly. And so all we could do was really say, you know, this piece was choreographed for you as like a prayer. The piece was called Intercession or something. And there was like some different like carrying and lifts of one another and things like that. It was set by Jolene Conkle, who founded the School of Dance Studies in Montana. Okay. She has a company now in Minneapolis. So we performed this piece, and none of us can speak Mandarin, you know? And we're sort of like amateurs compared to these amazing like dancers, especially in Asia. They're just so excellent, you know, in the way that they work. And we finish this piece and we look around and they're all crying around this room, like sitting against the mirror. Wow. And that was a moment that I'm like, we speak their language. Like we can speak their language. Their language is dance, you know, like even an abstract piece. Of course, these dancers who are on the other side of the world, you know, they get it. And so that opened up some side conversations where we could talk more deeply about, you know, who we were and things like that. So it's like those stories and then many others, you know, just these moments, I guess. But yeah.
That's amazing. Yes. There is something really powerful about that. Like you said, that connection of, you know, the arts and dance that connects to the heart and helps people maybe feel seen or understood in a deeper way. And that openness to connect and to share after that is really powerful. So I'm curious, any other stories that come to mind for you personally of just how you've seen God move in your life and your ministry over the years? I know that's a very broad question. So, but if anything comes to mind.
You know, we just had, I had worked here being Costa Rica. I'm currently traveling, but I had been there about 5 years or something like that. And we were about to run our first school of dance. There were just so many moments that it felt like we would get started and then something would happen. I mean, I would finally get a space on the campus for dance, and then someone passed away on our staff team. And so like one of the dancers left, just like things would kind of start and then fall through and then start and then fall through, you know, like we would have dancers, but we wouldn't have students for our program, or we would have students, but no staff. There were just these different moments, you know, and I think a lot of it was the Lord working in me and kind of preparing my heart for dance to kind of get off the ground in our campus, and working on me, my character and everything, but also working on the campus and the base. We call them bases, but kind of cultivating the ground. But there was really a moment of just harvest when one of the girls, I think it was during then we had a pandemic, right? So that was another thing where we're like, well, go home, guys. Like, we're going to be on Zoom, I guess, you know, which we didn't do a lot of, but I had one dancer with me who really pushed me through that season. And she's like, I had this dream that the dance ministry and the media department, which was my husband's department, are like the biggest departments on the campus, are flourishing. And I'm like, sure, you know, like keep dreaming. I'm out of here. Like, it's not happening. And then that started to happen. There was just suddenly, it was in 2021. I had just had my second daughter, and suddenly I have 9 dancers. It was almost like a pilot program for the school. I have 9 dancers who came for the ministry. And then after that, the next season in April, that was in September. And then the following April, I had 9 students for the School of Dance. And it just was this I really felt the Lord just affirming kind of that it was his timing. It was his program. Like, it wasn't up to me to push it off the ground, you know. And that season was so special because we had lights donated for our stage. We had a stage built, you know, that the dancers worked their butts off on. They worked really hard on, and painted and sanded. And then, but it's for the whole campus, you know, this stage. And then through that, a guest artist donated light fixtures for the stage, which is amazing. Someone else donated a portable mirror. And those are physical things, you know, but they were so important. Just God's affirmation. And even just the number of students for the first time to run a school and have 9 students, it probably sounds small, but sometimes you can start with 3, you know. And so it was such an affirmation. And I just look back at that school as kind of like a harvest moment.
Yes, that's such a great picture of just, you know, how God provides, and maybe not the timing that we envisioned.
Usually not, right?
Not. Yeah. That's so cool. Well, I love your heart for discipleship and just the passion that you have for that. So I'd love to hear more about when that maybe became like your heart's passion, and what that looks like day to day for you.
It's actually a very specific moment. I was doing my School of Dance in Montana. I was about 22 or 3, I think. And I had this dream, and I was standing in front of this nameless, faceless dancer, a female, and I was really intensely like encouraging her or exhorting her, like, you know, discipling, quote unquote. And I woke up kind of like, what was that about? You know, and I felt like the Lord was really clear, like, you're called to disciple dancers. It sounds like it just was very clear. And it's been really helpful as kind of like a guidepost for me, because I can be very, you know, like the artist, like, oh, I just want to go do my own thing, you know. I wanted to, or even with motherhood, oh, I just want to be home with my kids, which right now I am more in a season like that. But yeah, it's just been this call over my life. Actually, at the moment, my husband and I are kind of processing a transition where we might be stepping more into the community in San Jose. And I also would love to homeschool my kids. And so we're kind of looking at a transition. I'll be having a kid right before the next School of Dance, so it most likely won't be running because of some different variables, but maybe 2025, everyone. But that I know that the Lord hasn't lifted that word over my life to disciple dancers because of looking back at this moment. I think it's something that will last my life, I think. And he continues to put those people in front of me, or those opportunities in front of me, I think, without trying to look for them.
Yeah.
So it's again, that obedience of, and it's not easy. Sometimes you're dealing with people who are struggling with very serious things, you know, and you're like, oh, it would just be so much easier if you would just dance, you know, like, but there's so much more to us as humans, you know, and so it's dealing with the heart and all of those things. But yeah, that was the moment, definitely.
That's really, really powerful. Just knowing, like, kind of having your why and having that sense of purpose, I think, you know, is really, really, really cool to be able to look back on and say, okay, Lord, you've brought me here and you've equipped me for this. And yeah, just continuing to pour out. So I know you've probably worked with a number of dancers over the years, and then also just yourself starting, you know, at 15. And I'm sure there's the question of, like, am I good enough in comparison, and dealing with insecurities and things like that. Do you have an encouragement for, you know, maybe other dancers that are out there, or artists who are kind of battling that, you know, well, in the world's eyes, I'm too late, or I'm whatever it may be, they're feeling discouraged or kind of insecure in taking steps forward?
Right. I think I was kind of reflecting back on my journey, of course, preparing to chat with you.
Yeah.
And I think the blessing that came with starting late was that I had a sense of wonder about everything. Like, I felt I started late, like I shouldn't even be here, you know? And there was a moment when I was training with Adem that it was so clear, like, oh, wow, like, especially during Petit Allegro, you know? I don't know. I do not have the years of ballet under my belt like these girls do. And so I would be practicing in the swimming pool. It kind of lit a fire under my butt, you know, like taking extra adult open classes of ballet, and finally had a breakthrough with an amazing teacher, Clara Cravey, who recently passed away, but who was with Houston Ballet. But I think it's going back, because since then I'll have moments where I've been around the dance world long enough, or, you know, you no longer seek the approval of your director, but now you seek the approval of your students or something like that, or you're seeking approval as a teacher or as a choreographer. And so there's always, I think that when it becomes, when you feel like it should be something you've mastered, it becomes difficult. And I was just meditating on this idea of, like, wonder, like, if we continue to have this sense of wonder, and isn't that what Christ says, like, be like a child, you know, to enter the kingdom. And of course that goes back to identity. Like, my identity should be in that I'm, you know, this is cliche and we hear it all the time, like, we're a child of God, you know, that's where our identity should lie. But really, I think as a child, like, a child is so proud of the art that they create, and they are not worried. They just assume their father is going to love it. And hopefully, you know, and I think when I'm able to face things like with a childlike sense of wonder and a gratefulness, instead of, oh, I should be here, or I should be like that other person, you know? So going back to wonder. And the other thing I heard, I think my mom told me this, good old wisdom from your mom. She, at one point, this probably had to do with boys back in the day or something other than dance, but she's like, there's nothing that someone else can take away from what the Lord has for you. And so even with starting, like, you talked about being nervous and, like, starting something new, there's, I don't know if we talked about this already since we started recording, but I'm looking at continuing this idea of discipling dancers through a podcast. Maybe it'll take that direction a little bit, especially being home with my kids, and it might be more flexible, but that's a whole new space. And so every new thing starts to feel, it makes you feel nervous. It can make you feel intimidated, you know? And I'm like, but if I maintain that sense of wonder, and it's like, I'm just glad to be here, you know? I remember taking a ballet class at Steps on Broadway in New York City. And I think I took an advanced ballet class, and I was like the worst, I was the bottom of and I'm like, I'm just happy I'm here. Like, I'm happy I'm not drowning, like this is amazing. Yes. So I don't know. I think maintaining that sense of wonder, because comparison just kills,
It does.
Just kills joy.
I love the maintain a sense of wonder. I'm like, I just need to keep that in my mind as well. Because it's so true when we're creating or even leading or teaching, it's like so easy to get bogged down. But I love that because it's just kind of a curiosity and we're still here to learn and we're enjoying and appreciating the gifts that everyone else brings to the table. And yeah, there's just such a freedom in that, I feel. So yeah. Well, speaking of starting new things, so maybe we can
jump the gun.
Yeah, no, you're good. We can kind of dive into the new podcast that's coming soon to be launched. So it's called Dance and the Sacred podcast. Yeah. So exciting. So what's kind of your premise behind the podcast, or what your hope is for it to be about, or like the vision? Yeah.
I think it was birthed. It hasn't been launched, so I don't know if it's been birthed yet, but I think it came kind of from this transition that I'm in, and just processing with the Lord. Okay, Lord, what does discipling dancers look like in a potentially homeschooling my kids season, or things like that, and trying to, wrestling with identity. Like, what happens if I step away and take maybe a more pastoral role instead of a hands-on role in what I was doing. YWAM schools can be so incredibly intensive, because you're discipler, nurse, mentor, dance teacher, just so many things at once in a really intensive span of time. So what kind of wrestling with the Lord, like, what does that look like? And so, I think dance and the sacred, because sacred dance is like another thing, would communicate another thing, So for me, I've been just reading a lot of different things, like having sort of an evolution in my faith too, like going back to orthodoxy and even ancient orthodoxy, and just kind of exploring more sacramental things and sacred things, mysticism, mystic things, not to freak anyone out, but early church, and church fathers and those kinds of things, and just really having a beautiful sort of opening of different things in my faith. And along with that, just loving thinking about the arts on that level, and in sort of partly I think it's exploring these things that I love that have to do with theology and the sacredness of the arts and the impact of the arts. I don't know, creative impact, the creative impact. And then on the other side, I think that these years of just walking with dancers and seeing different things that dancers struggle with, Christian dancers specifically, and perhaps turning that into something more practical for them. Just like I told you that I was able to escape from my kids for a little bit and recorded one episode about injury, just how we face injury in a way that's honoring injury and illness, I think in a way that's honoring to the Lord. And so topics like that, like what does dance look like when it comes to healing, like we were just talking about, or how do you deal with those enemies of the artist, like competition, like, and maybe some other things, I think in the arts is really where the enemy attacks us in regards to our sexual identity and our body image and all of those things, food. I mean, in the last School of Dance, we had a session I never saw before, I never expected. And almost everyone had a complicated relationship with food in different ways, and not having an eating disorder necessarily, but everyone had a complicated relationship with food. And so we just had this like moment, this like healing session around food, and Christ invites us to like the table, right? Like the banquet and even the Eucharist or the
communion,
Santa Cena. How do you say what communion? Is like come to the table, and so I just like kind of finding those connections and exploring that. Like I told you, I think it's going to evolve, and I'll discover and probably shift directions, and
that's so true.
The podcast lead me maybe.
I love that. I think that's going to be such a beautiful offering to, this community and to all who get to listen to it. So I'm excited to be able to share that with people as it comes out. And we were talking about like, there's room for all of us, like keep coming. Cause I feel like there's so many different, beautiful voices, and, each of us has something to bring that God's given us into the world. So it's really exciting.
Yeah. And I'm also excited for that community, because I think I tell my husband, I want to be home with our kids. That's something deep inside of me. My mom was home with us, but at the same time, I need that connection, with other adults. And so even getting to connect with you is really exciting, because you have so many years more experience in this space, and also in the arts, specifically arts and faith,
right.
and podcasting space. And I'm like, oh, this is really cool. Like, I can be home, but not alone.
Yes, exactly.
That's really,
exactly.
I am excited for that. And I'm definitely going to keep picking your brain about some things.
For sure. I'm excited about that. It's fun just seeing over time, I kind of forget sometimes how there is a really neat ripple effect that happens from the podcast. So, I'll realize, oh, so-and-so connected with this other person, or, they heard the podcast and then they realize like they were a great connection for some other project or whatever it is. So it's just exciting seeing how it is building community, even if I don't always see it directly, like day to day.
Sure.
I'm excited that there's kind of more of almost like a network of believer artists that are starting podcasts and creating content, and it'll be really fun to link arms a little bit and like we're not alone.
So, definitely.
Yes.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really cool. I'm excited to get it. I'm excited and nervous to get into that space, but nervous is good sometimes, right?
Exactly. Yes. I know I've heard a lot of people talk about kind of the resistance that comes when, you're pursuing something that is bringing, good and bringing truth and bringing light and everything. And so, I feel that a lot with the podcast and with other projects like that. So I think that means you're headed in the right direction when you face
that. That's a good reminder. Yeah. That's a good reminder.
Well, this has been so fun, and we'll definitely stay connected. That'll be great.
Yes.
Be able to encourage each other along the journey. And
yes, that would be really nice.
So I love to ask everyone that comes on the show, is there something on your heart right now that you'd like to share with other artists?
I think with some things that I've walked, some discipleship things that I've walked through recently with some dancers, I think what I would love to say to all the artists, Francis Schaeffer wrote a couple essays called Art in the Bible. They're really worth a read. They're old, they're from back in the day now. There have been probably some more recent things written recently say similar things better, maybe, or more updated. Yeah. But he talks about how our whole life is our like magnum opus, not just one choreography or one performance or something like that. But I've been thinking a lot about, something that I want to emphasize for young dancers specifically, but us as artists, we artists and dancers, is this idea of holiness, I think, in our lives, that our whole life is reflecting Christ. And I think we can think sometimes that sin is sin is so deceptive, I've just seen sin ransack. Is that a word, ransack in English?
Yes.
Yeah. Just ransack the ministries and lives of Christian artists. And I'm not speaking of one specific person, just like I've seen over the years, you know, and heard also, like, walked into ministries where it was destroyed for a season because of something. And I just feel like really zealous for this holiness, I think, as artists, that but by the grace of God go I, you know, because I'm not above falling either. And I just think it's so important that we can think something is over here and it doesn't affect our ministry or our calling. I see ministry as every aspect of life, whether you have a job or whatever. It doesn't have to be traditionally missions, you know, but just this idea of walking in holiness, walking in obedience, being above reproach, like that there's no such thing as private sin, you know, like everything that we do has a ripple effect and can really sorry, I'm losing my English with my wreak havoc or whatever you say. And just like that we would thirst after righteousness, I think, as artists. I think it's so important because artists are so attacked with these things, I think, specifically sexual things and sexual identity and things like that, but other things as well. And yeah, so that's my prayer and heart for young artists, that we would thirst for righteousness in every area.
That's so good.
Of our lives.
Yes, thank you. And for fun, I like to end on, what is one of your favorite things right now? So that could be anything.
That's a great question. I love that. Coffee? Who doesn't say coffee?
Right.
I think being a mama, I just love my kids. Like, I love being with my kids, and sometimes I need a break, of course. Yeah. This has been nice to have an adult conversation this morning, but I just love being a mom, and I've shifted to kind of stewarding our home a little bit more. And my husband's been doing more photography and video gigs. And so I've really just enjoyed that. I'm really enjoying that season. Nothing to do with dance.
That's a great answer. I love it. And then just to let people know, I would love to let them know where they can connect with you, or also get connected in with YWAM and what's going on, the School of Dance and all of that. So what's the best way to do that?
With the School of Dance, or the dance ministry at YWAM, we have an Instagram page, which is called YWAM SJ Dance, and SJ stands for San José. YWAM SJ Dance. And I think it's the same on Facebook.
Okay.
If you want to email the dance department, which is essentially me, it would be dance@ywamsj.org.
Awesome.
And then for me personally, I'm just known as Chelsea Dawn on Facebook. I think Instagram, it's Chelsea_DWN. And now I have opened Dance in the Sacred, I don't know. There's not much to respond to there yet, but Dance in the Sacred on Facebook, and then on Instagram with _. And
awesome. Yeah. Perfect. Well, I'll put those in the show notes as well so people can check it out. But just wanted to thank you again so much for coming on the show and just sharing your heart with us and your journey. And so excited for what's to come in the future.
Thank you, Rachel. You're such a great interviewer. I'll be watching your work and taking notes. Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, thank you. You can find all the links, full show notes, and additional resources on our website, creativeimpactpodcast.com. If you're interested in supporting the show, some great ways to do that are to share it with a friend, to rate and review wherever you're listening, and then also, if you're interested in giving financially, you can check out our Patreon community, where you get bonus content each month and have a special part in helping make this podcast possible. You can access our Patreon community on the link at our website, or by going to creativeimpactpodcast.com/PATREON. Thank you all so much for listening to the Creative Impact Podcast. The music for the show was produced by Michael Cash. Until next time, remember that you were designed to create. You were made to inspire. Continue living with purpose and making an impact. I'll see you next time, friends.